My name is Joy Armstrong. I know almost all of you, but if you don't know me or I haven't met you yet, that's who I am. I'm the director and curator of the Galleries of Contemporary Art, the space that we're in. And I am so excited to have this be our first chit chat at GOCA since pre-pandemic. So it's been a number of years. I was the board chair for GOCA many moons ago, and Chit Chat was one of my favorite GOCA events. So I am really excited now to be the director here and to be able to bring back this really fun event. So I know a number of you have been to a Chit Chat before. Who's been to one before? No. Okay, so just a few. So I'll explain a little bit about what Chit Chat is, and then we're going to dive right in. Chit Chat is inspired by a similar mixed speaker series that was from the Museum of Contemporary Art in Denver called Mixed Taste. And so Chit Chat was born out of the same model. So through Chit Chat, we are bringing together two speakers who are experts in their respective fields to speak on different topics. Each have 20 minutes to speak, and then at the end of that 40 minutes of speaking, we will have time to, because we've all taken notes and made connections and asked questions. So by the end of both speakers, we'll be able to ask some questions and draw some connections together as a group. Yeah, makes sense? Okay. I will be timing speakers and kind of flag you down if we are approaching the 20-minute mark. But let's go ahead and get started. So, our first speaker this evening, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that we are bringing Chit Chat back in partnership with our friends in TheaterWorks. Yes. So some of you may be subscribers to this second Thursday performance at TheaterWorks. And so Caitlin has been such a tremendous collaborator, and so the pre-show event is now Chit Chat, and so GOCA is bringing a speaker to the table, and TheaterWorks is bringing a speaker to the table. So we're very excited, and I'm sure at some point we will encounter Chit Chats where we do not know who the other person has invited. I mean, maybe, ostensibly. So, we're going to bring up our first speaker. I am a little slap happy this evening. I just will apologize in advance. For no reason other than I'm delighted you're all here. So, Dr. José Antonio Arellano is an associate professor of English and Fine Arts at the United States Air Force Academy, where he has taught a Shakespeare play almost every semester for the past 5 years. Before UCCS, he taught Shakespeare at West Point as a postdoctoral fellow and at the University of Chicago as the teaching assistant to David Babington, one of the most prolific editors of Shakespearean and Renaissance drama. Dr. Arellano's forthcoming race class, Reading Mexican-American Literature in the Era of Neoliberalism, 1981 to 1984, is under contract with Cambridge University Press. He is also an art critic who writes for art publications, including the Denver-based art magazine, Daria. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Arellano.
Okay, so I have a timer here, so.
So thank you very much, everybody, for being here. I never take it for granted that this is how you're choosing to spend your Thursday evening. As a student, I always told myself that I will do this type of work for as long as I could, and if I can make a living at it, great. If not, I will do it for free. And as I was a student, especially when I was a graduate student, I started to look at the job market, and I started to look at the available positions. And one position opened up at the United States Military Academy, otherwise known as West Point. And I looked at that position, and I thought, okay, the reality of it was one that gave me pause. The location I thought would have worked well with my family, the proximity to New York City. They let me know that Shakespeare was an important part of their curriculum, so I would be teaching Shakespeare. I had studied it a little bit, but that wasn't what I specialized in. But for me, really, it was the reality of what it would mean to be a part of the United States military, even in a teaching capacity. Like, what does that mean, and what role does literature play? And I thought about it for quite some time, and I was speaking to some of my colleagues and some of my friends, and I'll never forget one friend said, "Oh, well, you would be just like Danny DeVito in the movie Letterpress," which gave me pause. I said, I will be no such thing. So
You're taller.
yeah. Finally. So I did a lot of thinking, and I did a lot of soul searching, and I was fortunate enough to have a choice. So it was a decision that I wanted to make very consciously, and because I am quite bookish, I started to read as much as I could, to help make an informed decision. One book that I read was The Theater of War. And in it, Brian argues that theater has always been an important part of military service, and the tradition is quite long. Sophocles was a general in the army of the time. And the theory is that the Greek soldiers who had experienced war would be invited to perform in the Greek tragedies. And that would have helped them make the transition from the world of the war to their home life. And it also, the theory goes, would have helped with PTSD. So I thought, okay, I was fascinated by that. But then I thought, but the reality of what I would be doing is teaching 18 to 22-year-olds who probably had never served. Many of them had never served, hadn't experienced war. So I just thought, okay, so there's that. Another book that I read was Elizabeth Salmon's Soldier's Heart. Soldier's Heart refers to how they would refer to PTSD during the Vietnam era. During World War I, it was called a shell shock. If you had PTSD, you were shell shocked. During the Vietnam era, you were afflicted with the affliction that is affecting the soldier's heart. In this book, and I should say Elizabeth Salmon teaches at West Point, and she's a professor of English there. And in this work, she describes this, I'll read a quote from the book. "The cadets I teach negotiate the multiple contradictions of their private and professional worlds. Because they serve at the bottom of a hierarchy, not especially interested in their opinion, cadets, especially those in their first year, at once crave and fear the freedom to wonder." The freedom to wonder, and that grabbed me, the freedom to wonder. And I thought, okay, if I accept this position, I'm going to do it very consciously, and I'm going to take it quite seriously. And what is it that I'm going to be bringing to my students? And that phrase, the freedom to wonder, is one that I took with me. And so what you're going to see here is West Point cadets performing Shakespeare. The intro to literature course has a Shakespeare unit, a Shakespeare component. We invite the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival actors into our classrooms, and they led a series of acting exercises. So what you're seeing here, I believe, is a scene from The Tempest. And what I found wonderful about this was it gave them the opportunity to play, to wonder, but also, importantly, to embody the meaning that the text was presenting to them on the page. This transition from page to stage is one that's often difficult. There's a meaning that's on the page, but then it's not entirely clear. When they're performing, they have to make decisions about what they think that scene means. And they have to make that decision then and there, and they have to embody it, they have to express it. So does Gertrude know that there's poison in the cup as she drinks it? You have to know. You have to know, because it's the way that you perform it. When Beatrice tells Benedict, "And Benedict, love on, I will requite thee," is she saying that because she loves him, or she feels forced to say that? When Hal in Henry IV, when he says something like, well, let me quote you a little bit. When Hal, who is a prince, about the age of my students, 17 years old, he has to figure out what kind of a life he's going to lead. His dad's the king. He really likes to hang out in the taverns. He really likes to hang out with Falstaff, who loves to drink, and he has this wonderful way with words. When Hal says, "I know you all, and will a while uphold the unyoked humor of your idleness, yet herein will I imitate the sun, who doth permit the base contagious clouds to smother up his beauty from the world." How is he saying that? Is he saying that the contagious clouds are his friends, that he's strategically using as a way to exemplify his own glory? And if so, shouldn't we hesitate about a character that's essentially using people for his own sense of honor and glory? This happens early on in Henry IV, when he says, "I will imitate the sun by breaking through the foul and ugly mists of vapors that did seem to strangle him." Who are these foul and ugly mists? Or he's referring to folks like Falstaff. So when the cadets perform, so here they are performing similar soliloquies. I believe this is from Hamlet. This one is in my classroom. He was doing Julius Caesar. This one is in this room. Speaking of situations that make me take pause, this has a lot of the cannons that are referred to as trophies. And they were performing these plays. But when they're in a scene such as that, you have to decide, is he, a 17-year-old, performing so that he can figure it out for himself and he's testing things out? Or is he already a kind of Machiavellian figure who has figured it out and he knows exactly what he's doing and he's using these folks? So in a way that begins to answer this question of why Shakespeare. Because couldn't we study other playwrights? Couldn't we study more contemporary playwrights? And we could. We absolutely could. But one of the advantages of studying Shakespeare is that we're turning to the past to understand our present. And Shakespeare does that. He's writing these histories in order to understand present day England. And he's presenting a mirror to the society. And he's asking the audience, what are we as a nation? And he's presenting various aspects of the nation. He's presenting the tavern with all of the tavern's language, the wonderful, obscene, often, moments. And then he's presenting the court with Hal's father. And you can just imagine how Hal's father speaks. He speaks very directly and very clearly. The exact opposite of Falstaff. So by turning to the past, so I should tell you that what I'm asking my students to do here is I try to keep a very fast pace, and I have a whole set of these acting exercises. This one in particular is reenact a painting that you remember from your memory, and you got to do it now. I just find this work wonderful because they're always surprising. So this one is okay. You have 30 seconds. Decide which scene you're going to play. You have 30 seconds to figure out what scene from a movie you're going to perform. Talk to your team and figure out what that scene is. Do you know which scene this is? From which movie?
Is it from the Lion?
I love how that. Yeah, and here comes So, and again, the exercise here is meant to have them play, have them perform, loosen them up. We do this first, and then we break out our texts, and we recite some of the lines, and we pick out the operative word. In this line, what word do you think is going to get the emphasis? And again, they have to decide, and they have to figure out. In order for them to make these choices, they have to know what they think that line means in relation to the scene, how that scene relates to the act, how that act relates to the play. So it's one way of getting them to understand. Now, so why Shakespeare return to the past to understand ourselves? That's one advantage of dealing with Shakespeare specifically, but also Shakespeare is using the stage as a kind of mechanism or a technology or us. It's a set where we can ask or interrogate all of the concepts that we might take for granted. Concepts such as honor, concepts such as truth, concepts such as love. Every concept that we hold dear are interrogated quite intensely in each of these plays. And Shakespeare, in many of his plays, especially in the Henriette plays, he's very conscious that performance, theatricality, could play a role in testing these ideas out. So in the Henriette plays, you will see Hal, the future king Henry V. He will dress up and he will perform. And he, at one stage, dresses up, or he pretends that he is this other character, Hotspur, who is this kind of embodiment of chivalry, this embodiment of honor. And he pretends that he is him, and he speaks the way that he does. In Henry IV, Part 2, he dresses up as a commoner, and he speaks to soldiers out on the field. So it's his way, well, it depends on how you're reading it. Is he, again, getting data in order for his glory to shine forth? Or is he a 17-year-old trying to figure it out? And he's not sure. And he's testing it, and he's testing the language. So he, at one point in Henry IV, Part 1, he pretends to be his father, and he speaks the way that it is. Or, excuse me, he practices what he would say to his father, and Falstaff it plays the role of the king. You know what painting this one is? They surprised me with this one. It's Goya. It's Goya's the 3rd of May. This was, we had the actors from the London stage come to USAFA, and similarly, like at West Point, the actors from the London stage, they perform a play for us, but then the actors would come to our classrooms, and they would lead these acting exercises, and it was really quite useful because they would have, in my class, they would have the student read a soliloquy, and the students would walk around with the text, and anytime you encounter a question, go like this, and if you encounter a comma, you have to like pivot. If you encounter a period, punch. And so they're performing the soliloquy, and then it slows them down, and they recognize the role that the punctuation plays, and they recognize the meter, and they recognize when Hamlet is saying this. What is his thought process? And it really slows them down. Okay. So this is all a way of saying that theater plays this important role for us. It allows us to interrogate. It allows us to examine. So these are the actors, the TheaterWorks actors, who are wonderful in this play, by the way. If you haven't seen Henry, you absolutely should. Because you'll see how Shakespeare is giving us these worlds, and Hal is in between them. You have the world of the king, the stately court. You have the world of the tavern through Falstaff, and Hal is in between them. This is often referred to as, it's almost as if he has two fathers, and Hal has to figure out, well, which one am I going to, is he trying to figure out which one? Is he going to distinguish himself from them, or is he going to start to assume one of their positions over the other? Shakespeare also gives us another choice through Hotspur, which is a character that embodies chivalry and honor. He's a really good soldier. He really wants to earn his honor through battle. And his language is often about that. He has no time for music, doesn't want to hear music. He's delivered letters during the battle, and he's like, nobody has time. It's time to read these letters. I'm about to, and that's actually quite useful because it's quite useful for USAFA cadets, because here you have somebody who isn't taking the time to make an informed decision, for example. Is too quick to hunt for, to search for honor. Doesn't take the time to listen. Doesn't take the time to consider. Doesn't take the time. So you have Falstaff, you have Hotspur, this honorable soldier, and you have Falstaff, who is explicitly asking, what is honor anyway? And I just want you to hear a little bit of how about how Falstaff asks this question. This is Falstaff on the battlefield. Can honor set to a leg? If my leg breaks, will honor fix it? No. Or an arm? No. Or take away the grief of a wound? No. Honor hath no skill in surgery then? No. What is honor? A word. What is in that word? What is that honor? Air. A trim reckoning. Who hath it? He that died on Wednesday, does he feel it? No. Does he hear it? No. 'Tis insensible then, yeah, to the dead. But will it not live with the living? Honor? And his answer is no. Why? The traction will not suffer it, therefore I'll none of it. No thank you. It's fascinating having a cadet recite those lines, because at the United States Air Force Academy, they have to swear to the honor code. Does anybody know what the honor code at UCCS is? I will not.
We will not accept any of those that lie, cheat, or steal.
Yes, ma'am.
Something.
So essentially, yeah, that's exactly right. We won't tolerate lying, stealing, cheating. All the qualities embodied by Falstaff, essentially. Falstaff lies and he steals and he cheats. So in a sense, we would have to, as future officers of the United States Air Force, reject what Falstaff embodies. You have to reject it. You absolutely have to say no to it. But in order, I think, for that to be a conscious decision, in order for that to be something that you understand, not in a kind of bullet point way, but in order for that to be embodied, that meaning to be embodied, it's quite useful to have Falstaff in your life. He's funny, he's quite charismatic. It's difficult to not like Falstaff. And I don't think that our role is to say no to Falstaff. I think that Falstaff plays a role. He speaks these linguistic circles around everybody around him, and it's pleasurable, and it's a lot of fun. So perhaps there is a role for Falstaff, even for my students, and I think it is especially for my students. So at the end of, I'll skip this one. At the end of my journey so far, here we are. This is one of my class. These are some of my students, and I find myself. I don't quite like that reader, but it's something that it's something that I quite enjoy, and it's important work, and it's quite meaningful work. And I do think that the theater allows us to really examine these concepts, to really ask and to embody that meaning in a way where that propositional logic just can't give you. You have to experience it. You have to see these actors. You have to see the decisions that they make. And I think that work is important. Thank you.
Amazing. I promise I have a little bit more together than I did at the beginning. So on to our second speaker. Morgan Calderini surrounds herself with rather odd yet satisfying specialties. Hot air balloon building, printmaking, and pie baking are all things she takes very seriously. After receiving her BFA in printmaking from RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design, she founded Ladyfingers Letterpress in 2010 with her spouse and co-conspirator, Arlie Torsam. At the helm of the Colorado-based lettering and printmaking studio, classroom, third space, third place, and retail experiment, she uses the power of the press to produce and disseminate work that mobilizes movements, builds communities, and envisions new futures. When she's not baking blueberry pies, she's flying Atlas, her 70-foot balloon that she built in 2007, and that I will note will be, weather God's willing, inflated on the lawn of the Ent Center on Saturday, October 5th. So please join me in welcoming Morgan.
wish I had had a theater teacher like you.
Have you ever had a theater teacher?
Don't we all?
I mean, I think only in middle school it was very first and last time. Hi everyone. So I was talking with Arlie about what I wanted to share with you all, and we very often get to talk about Ladyfingers together, and I definitely will share a lot of that work, but I also wanted to talk about how this project with the hot air balloon, and also before the hot air balloon, brings us all here to this picture of our work. This is our family in our print shop downtown, and Joy just gave you a great summary. Those are some of the cards that Arlie designs and letters, and I print. We have classes and workshops, and we print a lot of posters like these ones that I wish we could stop printing. That's me in the front of that photo down there, that small figure holding a Cabbage Patch doll, on the corner of Briargate and right where Library 21C is, Chapel Hills Mall, there. I lived up the street, and this balloon was landing, and my mom threw us in the car and drove us all down to the corner, and somewhere in the scope of my memory, this really stuck, because when I started kindergarten, this is what I was bringing home from kindergarten. These were my drawings and stories about this balloon. And I just kind of like, you know, we grew up here in Colorado Springs with the Balloon Festival. It was always a thing. And I went away to school. I got as far away from Colorado Springs as I possibly could, and I did that thing where I swore I would never go back. I intended to study printmaking, or I intended to study graphic design, and thought I would just kind of like hang out in the print department for as long as I could, and if I could make a living on it, I would. And then I had a terrible class where a graduate student asked, like, oh, you had such a good time on this assignment. What would your client say about this? And I thought, I can't spend the next 4 years, which is like all that's promised to me, and then like not having to, you know, have a real job life, answering that question. So I hung out in the printmaking department. I called my parents and I said, I'm going into printmaking. And they said, what do printmaking students do? And I said, well, all the ones who've graduated work at Whole Foods, just right up the street. So I have a plan. That's my plan. But I also had this very technical education that was super focused on a very small sliver of the art world. And so the options that were presented to us were often you could move to New York City, work in a professional printmaking studio, printing the work of artists who had no idea how to print themselves, but those prints would sell for a lot of money, and you could go print Chuck Close's work or Kiki Smith's prints in New York. As a student, that was kind of the only idea that was presented, which was a real bummer because printmaking attracted me with the community space and the lively groups of people. You're never in the studio alone. Everyone's there working together. You're asking someone to hold something for you because it's too big and you're mixing colors, and it's a lively, entertaining space. It was different than the small studios I saw other students have. But I knew that I was kind of like missing some pieces in my education. And what I was really looking for was the idea of learning the skills I wasn't learning. So I wanted to know how to complete a project. I wanted to know how do you fundraise money for something that is a project beyond what you can do as a student. And so I was like, what is my craziest dream? What is the thing that with this time I would spend doing, I'll never have this luxury again. And so I thought, I want to learn to fly. If I could learn to fly, then I feel like I could do anything. So I went on this path of learning about hot air balloons. They resurfaced, and I had been working with hot air balloons in my work for a long time. And then I kind of figured out the best way to get access to flying was to build your own hot air balloon. Because commercial hot air balloons sell for about $75,000, which was not within my budget. But you could build a hot air balloon for about $5,000. And so I set myself to building a hot air balloon as my thesis project. This is me at the art sale in the fall. I made all these prints and all these luggage tags, and I raised all the money to build a hot air balloon. And I found an alumni of my college who ran an FAA certified hot air balloon repair station in Vermont, who graduated in the 70s and was a photographer. And I called him up and I said, I'd like to build a balloon. And he said, come drive to Vermont. I didn't have a car. And so those kinds of things at that age and just figuring it out made a huge difference. I met Arlie in the midst of all of this, and at that time I had started a community print shop, which we'll see in a second, but Arlie drew me this picture, and we started this. This is me learning to fly the balloon to get a pilot's license from the FAA. And this is like my favorite part of ballooning, is this magic of landing, which you can see why. So, I had graduated, and I didn't have anywhere to print. And so all of my friends and I, you'll see that's the same friend in the last sale picture. My friends and I all got together and I wrote a grant, and we got a grant from AmeriCorps Vista, which is kind of like the domestic version of the Peace Corps. To solve poverty in America is the small goal of the AmeriCorps program. And every artist I knew in Providence fell within the poverty guidelines and was struggling, but often underserved and under-recognized as being in the poverty official definition. So we wrote a grant, and I got paid $741 a month plus food stamps to solve poverty in Providence, Rhode Island by starting this community print shop. And so we built everything from scratch. We would go out into the streets and silkscreen. People gave us presses. We taught classes. It was a workshop. It was a co-op. We raised all the money for everything. I remember someone coming to a letterpress class, and they're like, do you have another color of ink besides purple? And I was like, no, this is the only color ink we could afford. And the next week she brought us every color of ink, and she donated them. At the same time, we'll come back to the pies. So I used all my food stamp money to buy ingredients to sell pies for one Thanksgiving, so I could make enough money to pay for propane, so I could get my pilot's license. So that was my early time out of school. And then I fell in love with Arlie, who ran the design and communications part of the organization we worked for. And we wanted to get married, but it wasn't legal at that point for us. And this went on for a long time in Providence. Our office and our house were about 1 block from the State House, and so we would go and spend like 13, 15 hours at a time in the State House. And Arlie had these hand-painted signs, which were great, very much connected to Ladyfingers still. But in the print shop, it occurred to me one day that journalists and people would interview you, and then they would cut a tiny piece of what you said and put it in the paper. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, what if we printed some posters and we take them and we pass them out, we share them with everyone, and then the next day in the paper, the front of the paper was all of the posters, like a sea of the posters. And so we continued to make these posters, we testified, and then we started to get a little angry because nothing was changing. And all of the people on the poster on the left were elected officials who voted against not even same-sex marriage, but civil unions at that time. And so we, this was before like phones were what they are now. So we printed phone numbers, email address, office, and mailing address and photos of everyone who voted against it, and we covered the city. And we had friends who worked at the State House who said this was the most effective campaign to change the course of the thing because people thought they weren't going to be held responsible for their choice. At the same time, the print shop had been growing and was really, we were maxed out. It was a tiny studio, so we went through the process of expanding into this historical building that was a print shop and getting it bigger. And we were getting really tired, Arlie and I. But this is that building after the renovation. So we learned things from working there that were about historical preservation, about signs in buildings downtown, and how to be accessible to people and sustainable. And so we did this work for a long time. This is a giant printing press that was sitting in storage forever and had never been opened, and Misty paid an enormous amount of money in storage, and they just gave it to us. It is a pneumatic etching press.
I don't think you use the word gave.
Well, I was just stealing it. That is exactly what the provost said. Well, it's here now, so. At that point, we decided if we were going to continue being poor artists, we could be poor artists ourselves, with the idea that someday we maybe could have another choice or another path for ourselves. So we bought this rusty press, the back of this shipping container, and moved it into the studio. We did buy this one. Harley can verify for me, we did buy this one, and it also, the guy there, Steve, I wanted the one at the back, right? He said he had to sell all the ones in the front before he could deliver it. And so when he showed up to our studio, he had all of them on the trailer. He's like, well, here you go. And he gave us all of them for the price of that one. And I restored them all and sold them to make money to fund what we were doing. And we outgrew our studio, and we were doing lots of wedding invitation design and card design at this point. This is around 2012. At this point, I was not doing any ballooning, and we were working really hard to try and not be poor artists and survive on our own. We went to a trade show, we sold cards. You'll see this is still a large part of what we've done today. And then the dang fire burned down my family's house here in Black Forest, and I ate those words about never coming back. So it took us about a year to get ourselves together and move our studio and our house and come out to Colorado Springs, which we thought would be temporary. We thought we would just kind of stop over for a bit and then move somewhere like Boulder, Denver, somewhere like that. But then we met people here who were great and wonderful, and it made us feel like we could live here. And it changed our minds when we could buy a house as artists, and then we found this studio, which was previously the Meeker Music Space, and we've restored it all to this now, as well as the rest of the block of our landlord. This is what it looks like on the inside, where we sell all our products and goods. Our studio's here. You'll see our posters. And we started making these posters. I forgot earlier to talk about how I didn't print on the outside. Sorry.
Talk about it now.
So, I may have conned the printmaking department in addition to stealing the press. I may have also graduated because I told them I would silkscreen my designs on the outside of this giant white balloon. That was my plan. I wanted to make something that lived outside of a gallery. I didn't want to print Chuck Close's prints and have them go into a flat file. I wanted to make something that you would just see floating through the sky like you do here in Colorado Springs. And so I never really got around to the printing part because I couldn't make up my mind about what it should be. And it felt really permanent. And so I kind of left it white. As you can see, many years have passed. We're here in Colorado Springs. This is in front of City Hall. We started making these posters much the same vein as our other posters. And then we made this poster, which we continue to print. And we think a lot about how we say what we say and what those words are and how we present them so people can find a place to meet each other rather than tune each other out. This is a poster that's part of a series that we're working with survivors and families of the Club Q event. I will say, because we've got kiddos here, and this is a series of many prints, and I think it's not uncommon for Arlie and I to process what's happening in the world through printing and through making things. And we wanted to invite others in to have that experience and that shared opportunity to process and work together so that they could gain some opportunity and for ourselves, have the opportunity to deal with what we're going through. So this is a poem that Arlie typeset that our friend Nico Wilkinson wrote. There's a series of these prints that this has been like the maybe second longest project of my life after this balloon. And that'll be out in November on the 2-year anniversary. And these are some guiding thoughts, but I want to get to the balloon. So when I saw Joy's call for the We Are the Sky, I realized I needed to come back to the balloon. And more than that, technology had changed so much, and I knew that I didn't want to be the only one, putting the message out to the sky on this balloon. And so my hope was I could invite the community to provide drawings, artworks, messages to share, and we could project it. It didn't just have to be one image, it could be a changing series of images over time, so that anyone might be able to share their idea with the sky and with anyone else who passes by. So we'll be projecting drawings. If anyone wants to leave a drawing, there's paper out there to make your own. We'll scan them all in, and those will be projected next week. This was a practice inflation. I'll end with this, but this is my daughter in front of this red line here, pulling the rope, and then the kids playing inside the balloon. If it's windy, we might do something like this, but that's her there, my twins, and this is my daughter's drawing she made after the practice inflation. Then very much brought home my own drawings, so I'm excited for more kids and adults to get to be part of the project with the balloon. So I hope you'll leave a drawing if you'd like, or another piece of art, or a photo.
Thank you, Marie. So we've come to the question and answer and connection period of our time together this evening. Because we are a little behind schedule, we started about 10 minutes late. So in the interest of always trying to promise you to release you when I told you you would be released, we will do about 10 minutes of conversation, questions, answers for either, so I'll invite both of our speakers to come back up. We will, however, have some time afterward if you would like to work on a balloon design that's available to you, if you'd like to take one home for yourself or for a young person in your life and return it to Morgan at Ladyfingers or return it to us here at Goka. Lots of opportunity for that, as well as I will let Morgan share a little bit about another activity that we have available to us that relates specifically to Morgan's work, but also to a project that we have coming up this fall that is called Four Freedoms, that also connects to Henry, so where everything is coming back full circle. So Morgan, go ahead and come back up. I don't really have a question to kick us off. I did, however, write down a quote from each of you that I found especially inspiring. And so beginning with that, Jose, I loved that you were talking about the freedoms to wonder and thinking about the role of art in our lives and the way that that serves us in so many ways as we are processing experiences that we've had, thinking about grief and trauma, thinking about the hot air balloon and what that represents in terms of freedom, and art helping us to manifest what might feel like lofty ideas that we're bringing into the world in very real ways. Morgan, you said, and I suspect it was literal, but I took it in a less literal sense, when you talked about the value of community in the print shop and in your own practice. And you said something about being in the studio, that having community around was helpful when you needed someone to help holding something because it was too big. And that might actually make me feel a little teary in this moment, but thinking too about that, yes, in that very literal sense, but the ways in which we use theater and the ways in which we use art, and that we can learn about ourselves, that we can connect to others on a very human level and collectively hold things that are too big for any one of us. So I just thank you both for that. But I'm going to step away, and please shout something out. David, yes, we'll start over.
Number one, just applaud, jumping back, applaud the diversity of perspectives right here. I'm just struck by, Morgan, your ability to address issues like head-on with like, strongly messaged posters, like, whereas in your role, Jose, it's like you're much more the Socratic method of like, how do you ask questions? And I just want to ask a kind of a personal question for you that I applaud that our military academies are keeping art and that kind of concept in the curriculum. How do you, and this is not meant to be a criticism, how do you work with your students when theater and art is really meant to build empathy and understanding perspectives of another? Whereas my understanding of the essence of war is to dehumanizing the other, that they're not human and therefore we can kill them.
That's right.
How do you work with that?
And so I'm going to get here so that you all can hear me. A student just asked that last week. We invite a speaker every year. It's our big Janetta lecture. And we invited a general who flew the B-2. And he was the person that in a very famous Time magazine cover, you see Saddam's palace and it's exploding.
Yeah.
And that's my bomb. That's him.
Yeah.
He wrote an essay that is quite thoughtful, and it's very deliberate in its thoughtfulness, and he's narrating what it felt like making that flight. And it takes the span of about 25 pages, and he's trying to come to terms both with what he's doing and what he's doing means. And he's wondering, is there honor in this? And he's really questioning, and it's a thoughtful essay. So he came to our class and he talked to my students and he gave his lecture. And then the next lesson we had a debrief, and my students were asking, that was great, it was wonderful. However, it's difficult for me to process that right now when I have to be binary, where I have to. And it was a very sincere question. Sir, what would you have me do when I have to come home at the end of the day and I am one of these, I think it's RPG or RPA, I forget the drones. If I'm one of these operators, how do I come to terms with that and then come home? So for me, it has to be, that this is what the student was saying, it has to be binary. And I can't think about it, and I can't. And then other students started to ask, well, yeah, that's right. It's all well and good to have all this deliberation, but at the end of the day, sir, that's the enemy.
Yeah.
And I quite explicitly said, well, I'm glad you're in my class, because this is the space for you to think about that. This is the space for you to, if you don't want to think of yourself as a cog in the war machine, what does that require you to do then, if you're not just a cog? And if you don't have the opportunity to ask these questions out in the field, you're going to do that here. That's why we're here. that's why we're taking an intro to literature course. We also offer, it's English 411, which is a war literature course, and they read the perspectives, usually not of the American soldiers, but of Iraqi soldiers. They read a poetry from Afghanistan. They watch documentaries from the quote-unquote enemy, and they have to come to terms with it. So my answer is, that is why we do the work that we do. And it's difficult and it's challenging, especially when all of their training might be going the opposite direction. But I think that that's part of the reason why the service academies still insist that art be a part of their education. Because we don't, at the end of the day, want automatons. We don't want, for all of our talk about efficiency, and that's not what you want from your officers in the military. You want somebody who's quite thoughtful. You want somebody who's questioning. You want somebody who's going through that struggle. And that's what we do in my class. Please, ma'am.
So then, shouldn't your class be there when they come back?
There are opportunities, and especially here in Colorado Springs, there are forums for returning soldiers. I haven't experienced it yet in my own classroom where I've had vets come back. My colleagues have. I've only been, including West Point, will be my 6th year. A lot of my colleagues, especially Elizabeth Salmon's book, is all about this particular dynamic where her students go off and then they write to her from there, they call her, they carry a box of books with them, and then they come back and they will revisit with her. But I haven't had that experience personally where a vet will come back. But I do know that in Colorado Springs there are organizations that provide a place for the sharing of poetry. One of my friends has a nonprofit organization here in Colorado Springs where that's exactly what they do. They'll share photography, poetry, and other artistic expressions.
So I'm struck that both of your experiences and stories are somewhat driven by the uncertainty of what it means to make a life as an artist. And yet, Jose Antonio, your students are approaching art with the certainty of exactly what or quite a bit more certainty about what their life looks like over the next 20 years. And so, Morgan, I'm interested if you could hypothesize, think about how your artwork would be different if you had the same certainty that Jose Antonio's students bring to their work.
Like health insurance and retirement and those things. Yeah, it would be a different world if artists operated with the same set of societal support. But I clearly am committed to my work, and I often think there's nothing else I would be doing. So I did, just to tie in for a second, I did get to meet the Air Force pilot who flew Free Willy, the actual Free Willy. He's a letterpress printer in town, and I moved his press last night. He donated a bunch of stuff to Ladyfingers. He's an Air Force pilot. And a lovely guy in town who reached out was just in our shop and wanted to give equipment and pay it forward. And a lot of that equipment is going to one of the poets in the presentation. But yeah, weird small world.
The striking commonality that I saw between both of your experiences dealt with the experience of the artists themselves. In your case, the ancient Greeks coming back from war, and the role art plays for the artist in helping them process their own experiences and process the world around them. And in a lot of ways, I've always kind of considered this the danger to society of being an artist, is that you actually are able in this way to process the world around you instead of kind of keeping it at arm's length. And I wonder particularly for you, do you have any experiences of working with cadets either at West Point or USAFA who maybe start to have even revelations about where they're going, what they're doing, not that they're kind of saying, I have to ignore that right now, but like that, it jolts them out of the certainty.
Yeah. Yes, and it's a scary experience for them. Fortunately, the English department, it's the English and Fine Arts department, so we do both. But I mentioned that because it is a place on campus, or on base, as we say, that students feel that they can come to us to talk to us about that. And they can, it's because of the nature of what we teach and how we teach it. I have had several students, and it's scary because maybe their motivation to join the military was more, this was a financial security. It comes with job security, and it comes with health care, and it comes with a free education. It's a quality liberal arts education, but then the reality of everything starts to hit. And then they say, okay, well, do I give this up because I'm not sure how I'm feeling about this, or do I keep going? And a lot of myself and a lot of my colleagues, we feel these questions all of the time, and it's important. And my usual approach is to say, well, first of all, I'm glad that you're thinking about this, and I'm glad that you're questioning. I know it's scary, but you'd rather do that questioning right now. And it's not going to be the end of the world either way. I can assure you, and it takes a lot of courage. It's a kind of a leap that you're taking. But art does jolt them. It does give them pause. It does, and I think that's what it should. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. Please don't eat. Okay. But because I have a closing question that is really directed toward you. And that is that, we think about like Shakespeare and, this thing that we can look to the past in various ways to help understand our present. And Morgan, I was wondering if you could kind of tie things up for us by maybe reflecting on how your media, how the use of printmaking, how the use of protest posters, how that is something that Joy Armstrong can do today, not being Shakespeare, to help everybody, to help shape our future.
Yeah. We actually had a school reach out to us today and said, can you come make posters for kids about what they want to vote for? Not who, but what they want to vote for.
Yeah.
And these are elementary school kids. And that felt really inspiring and hopeful, and it can oftentimes not feel that way. So I think for me, it feels like this practice of putting messages or facilitating the messages of others and helping create it. We had a college class in yesterday, printing, helping people understand they have a voice and they can share it and they can advocate for what matters to them, and that it's okay to do that in print, which is like a even more special, more precious, more meaningful than yelling into your phone or reposting things that you see on the internet. Hang that poster up and share it with people and share a message that matters to you. So, I will see you next week.
Yes, thank you. Additional questions or thoughts, so we'll be happy to chat. If you have the time, I invite you to join us at a table that is situated behind you with Morgan and Arlie to maybe make some posters right now, or take some things with you. Yes, okay. I will be there, and thank you all so much for being here. Our next Chit Chat is December 12th. Is that correct?
Yes.
December 12th. Topics to be announced. So thank you so much for being here this evening.